I'm going to show you how to complete the Do Now from class today. The Do Now says, using the Morphi app, create a charm for a necklace with your first initial cut out of a 3 centimeter by 3 centimeter square. Attach a hole for the string to the top middle of the square. This square should have a maximum diameter, or this hole, excuse me, should have a maximum diameter of 1 centimeter. The width of or height of the charm should be a 1/2 centimeter at its widest point. And remember, there are 10 millimeters in 1 centimeter. So I'm going to start by opening my Morphi app and opening a new file for us to work with. Once I open it up, I'm going to get a new print bed on the board, and we're going to add the first shape. So we know that we need a cube that is 3 centimeters by 3 centimeters by a 1/2 centimeter. So in order to manipulate the size, I'm going to hit my little tab up here, and you'll notice that my size constraints are blank, and that's because my shape isn't highlighted. So I'm going to go ahead and highlight that shape, and you'll notice that this will now populate. We want it measure in millimeters. You could measure in inches also, but we're going to measure in millimeters because that is the unit that our printer beds work with. And we are going to have our millimeters. So this tells us that our cube is currently 7 millimeters by 7 millimeters by 7 millimeters. And that is way smaller than we need the length and the width. And it's actually a taller height than we would like. So we're going to manipulate that. There's a couple different ways you can manipulate size. You can change the size using these scales over here. Or you can change the scale using these pluses and minuses. If you want to change a uniform scale, so I want to make it everything bigger or smaller in the same rate or the same proportion, I can use that also. But I'm going to actually switch the scale over to make it to say size so I can manipulate my sizes. So I want my box to be 3 centimeters, which is 30 millimeters, by 30 millimeters. And then I want my height to be 5 millimeters, or a 1/2 centimeter. And now I have the square that I need. So I'm going to cut out the first letter of my name. So there's a couple different ways to do this. My first name is Lindsay, so I can choose a font that I want for my letter. And once I pick the font that I like, I can hit 3D, and it's going to go ahead and make it 3D. Whoops. And there it is. Okay, apparently I made 2. That works. I can pick the letter from down here, the letter L. That's another option. Or you can, you'll notice I keep accidentally hitting 2 things at the same time. Sometimes it could be a little bit tricky. Or I can go, if I click 2D to 3D, I can do a couple draw features. So I can make like a cursive L. If I don't like it, I can clear it. Maybe I want it to be thicker. So I can have that. And then I can just go ahead and hit 3D once I'm done. Okay, another cool thing you can do when you go to 2D to 3D is if you have the mirror feature, there's some symmetrical lines you can draw to help with design. Or you can, and it'll give you a guideline too if you want to see where that is. Or you can have multiple if you keep adding it. These are all different lines of symmetry. So now if I make one line of symmetry, I can make like a cool snowflake, right? And then if I hit 3D, it'll print that, or it'll put that on my print bed. But I don't need that right now, so I'm going to go ahead and delete it. It's really important that you delete anything you don't want to use. So if I'm looking at all my choices, I'm going to actually pick my cursive L for my choice, so I want to delete the other choices. I don't simply want to just make my other ones kind of go away. Like, see, I made it kind of go away, right? It doesn't look like it's there, but it's actually, if you look closely, it's back there floating around somewhere, which is going to cause a problem when we go to print. So you don't want to just make it erase off your print bed. You want to delete it. A trick that I've learned is if I make something kind of go away a little bit, and like let's say I don't see it anymore. So if I have this L over here, and I've been working on this, and now I don't see that other L. If I go to the view and I go to home, it'll spread it all the way out. And then I can see like, oh man, I have something over here, and you can try and click it. It sometimes can be kind of tricky to find it, but if you do get it, then you can go ahead and delete. If for some reason you can't find it, you have a couple different options. You can start over altogether, so you'll just hit save up here and you'll open a new print bed. Or you can copy the images that you want to keep. So I'll click both of these, go to clipboard and copy selected. And then if I save and open a new file, I can then paste those onto my new scene. And now I don't have that extraneous piece anymore. So we'll just work from here. I want to cut this out clearly through my red block. If I just simply move it over here and try and delete it, it's not going to give me a clear cut. So to help us with that, I'm going to take my L and I'm just going to make it really tall. So now you can see that it's much taller than my block, and then I'm going to place it where I want it to on my little keychain. I can place it a couple different ways. I can move it with my finger, or I can use the position grid over here to help too, whatever you would like. Okay, once I've done that, I'm gonna now click on my the area that I want to be my base, and I'm gonna move it up a little bit. I'll click on that arrow, move it up, and you'll see that the L goes clear through. So now when I click on the L, and I'll know that the L is highlighted because it's the darker color, I can then subtract it, and I'm left with a cutout of the letter L. Now we think about 3D printing, we know that this is going to actually be a little bit of a problem for me, because I'm going to, when I move my items down, you'll see I have some pieces sticking out of my shape, and that's because I don't have, I have holes, right? And there's nothing for that plastic to attach to. So cursive L is probably not the best choice because I'm going to get stuck with those pieces. But if I wanted to stick with it for the sake of just designing right now, this would not be a good print. I can move those pieces down. You'll notice I touch them both at the same time. And when I touch them both, here I'll do it again, when I touch them both at the same time, they both get highlighted. And I know they're both touched because of these blue squares show up, and then I can move them down together. If I want to make everything stick together as one piece, I'm going to click all of the pieces that I want to click together, and I'm going to hit the word group, and now I can move it together as a group. So I'm going to stick with this right now. I'm going to now add my hole for my string. I'm going to use this little donut guy over there. There are more complicated ways to do it, but I like to work smart. So we're gonna go with that little guy right there. You can add the rotate feature. You don't need to for this, but that's just something that you should know how to do. And when you go down to change the size again, we're gonna make sure it says size and not scale. And we know that it needs to be 1 centimeter in diameter by 1 centimeter. So I'm going to change it to say 10 millimeters because that's 1 centimeter. And now I have my little string hole. I also can, or now I want to attach it to the top. The best way to attach it is to just simply have the two objects overlap each other, and when they overlap each other, they'll automatically print when we export it to the printer. So that's the easiest way to do it. If you want to group it again, you can group it again. If you'd like to merge it to make it one color, it can merge, but like I said, those pieces aren't going to print, so it doesn't count it as part of that print. So you can do that. I simply think you can just add it and group it together. I like to group things better than merging them because you can always ungroup them. Once you're satisfied with your print, you will go ahead and check to make sure, check that view again. If your view shows that close-up of your image that you want to print, then you know that you have nothing extra on your print bed. Otherwise, you'll have something extra and you can troubleshoot with some of the ways that I mentioned before. One more thing to think about when we're printing is that you want to make sure that none of your objects, that all of your objects print correctly the first time. And while our printers are set up with some troubleshooting things such as supports to help you out, you really want to make sure that you are not printing anything that is sort of floating in midair. So if I wanted to print like this cone or this block, those would be easy things to print because I have nothing floating in thin air. They're good images to print. If I wanted to take my cylinder, let's say, and I wanted to print, we're gonna get rid of that cone because we don't need it anymore. And let's say I'm gonna make my diameter a little bit bigger, and I wanna balance the top of my cylinder on top of my cube, and I wanna print something that looks like this. Okay, the problem with that is if you think about how the printer works and it lays down one layer of filament at a time, I now have pieces floating in midair and the printer's not gonna know what to do with that. So if I simply group those together and I rotate them and I print the object this way instead, now the printer is able to print from the ground up with no problems. So those are the basics from your Do Now today and a couple of extra tips for Morphi. Good luck.